What's up, y'all? Welcome to Union Minded. I'm your host, Eric, and today we're going to talk about the National Labor Relations Act of 1935. The reason we're talking about this particular act is because there's a lot of question about whether or not superintendents are supposed to be union members or not. Superintendents are positions that determine hiring and firing, and thereby they are managerial by nature. And according to the National Labor Relations Act of 1935, they are not allowed to be members of a union. But let's dive into where the confusion comes from. According to the IBEW Constitution, Article 24, Section 1, any member who becomes an electrical employer, a partner in an electrical employing concern, a general manager, or any other managerial positions, or who retires from his trade, may apply to the financial secretary for a withdrawal card. It shall require a majority vote at a meeting to grant such a card. But the local union has the right to require such a member to take out a withdrawal card if it so decides. Now, there's a lot of confusion in reading this text. But if we take it step by step, basically it's saying that any member who becomes a contractor or a manager or a superintendent type position, a managerial position, they can apply for a withdrawal card. They may apply for a withdrawal card. That is not a requirement for them to withdraw. That says that they are allowed to apply for a withdrawal card. And it shall require a majority vote. The local union, however, has the right to require such a member to take out a withdrawal card. So the local union can require that members who become managerial shelve their cards, take out their withdrawal card, right? But if the local union doesn't require that, then by this text, it's perfectly acceptable for a superintendent to be a union member of a local union. That's according to the IBEW Constitution. However, the National Labor Relations Act and the Taft-Hartley Act and the LMRDA of 1957 consolidated into basically labor law, and it supersedes constitutions and bylaws that have rules and regulations in them that are contrary to those laws. And so with that, I want to point to Wikipedia's page on the National Labor Relations Act, and let's talk about a company or yellow union. What is that? Well, you might find the language more familiar if it says a contractors union, but let's read this and find out what it is. So a company or yellow union is a worker organization which is dominated or influenced by an employer and is therefore not an independent trade union. Company unions are contrary to international labor law. They were outlawed in the United States by the 1935 National Labor Relations Act, Section 8A2, due to their use as agents for interference with independent unions. However, company unions persist in many countries. Some labor organizations are accused by rival unions of behaving like company unions or contractor locals if they are seen as having too close and cordial a relationship with the employer, even though they may be recognized in their respective jurisdictions as bona fide trade unions. Now let's go into the history of this and why it was important to begin with. In the United States, company unions were common during the early 20th century, but were outlawed under the 1935 National Labor Relations Act. Again, that's Section 8A2. So that trade unions could remain independent of management. All labor organizations would have to be freely elected by the workforce without interference. See, if you have superintendents in your local union as members, they have undue influence, and it's contrary to what the labor union is supposed to be, because they're supposed to represent the members in the collective bargaining agreement process on the opposite side of the table from the contractors. In 1914, 16 miners and family members and one National Guardsman were killed when the Colorado National Guard attacked a 10th colony of striking coal miners in Ludlow, Colorado. This event, known as the Ludlow Massacre, was a major public relations debacle for mine owners, and one of them, John D. Rockefeller Jr., hired labor relations expert and former Canadian Minister of Labor William Lyon Mackenzie King to suggest ways to improve the tarnished image of his company. Mind you, this was to improve his company's image. This was not about worker safety or working with workers in order to find an agreement that both sides can agree upon. This was all about his company and saving the image. And the company's name was Colorado Fuel and Iron. One of the elements of the Rockefeller plan was to form a union known as the Employee Representation Plan, or ERP, based inside the company itself. The ERP allowed workers to elect representatives who would then meet with the company officials to discuss grievances. Imagine that. The company forms its own unions and then allows members to elect their representatives so that they can have a say in the grievance process. It makes no sense, but it's a nice way to try to defraud people. The ERP was accepted by the miners. Its success in providing an alternative to negotiations with the United Mine Workers led other business owners around the country and even overseas to consider replicating it. In 1933, the miners voted to be represented by the UMW, ending the ERP at Colorado Fuel and Iron. Company unions, however, continued to operate in other mines in Pueblo, Colorado and Wyoming, and the ERP model was being used by numerous other companies. The Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters was organized in part to combat the company union at the Pullman Company. In 1935, the National Labor Relations Act, also known as the Wagner Act, was passed, dramatically changing labor law in the United States. Section 8A2 of the NLRA makes it illegal for an employer to dominate or interfere with the formation or administration of any labor organization or contribute financial or support or other support to it. Company unions were considered illegal under this code, despite the efforts of some businesses to carry on under the guise of an employee representation organization, or an ERO. In the mid-20th century, managers of high-tech industry like Robert Noyce, who co-founded Fairchild Semiconductor in 1957 and Intel in 1968, worked to rid their organizations of union interference. Remember, the goal was always to get rid of unions. Remaining non-union is an essential for survival of most of our companies, Noyce once said. If we had the work rules that unionized companies have, we'd all go out of business. One way of forestalling unions while obeying the Wagner Act was the introduction of employee involvement programs and other in-house job cooperation groups. One company included them in their Intel values, cited by employees as reasons why they didn't need a union. With workers integrated, at least on a project level, into the decision-making structure, the independent union is seen by some as an anachronism. Pat Hill Hubbard, senior vice president of the American Electronics Association, said in 1994, "Unions, as they have existed in the past, are no longer relevant. Labor law of 40 years ago is not appropriate to 20th century economics." Author David Bacon calls EL programs the modern company union. In 1995, pursuant to a report from the Commission of the Future of Worker Management Relations, Republicans in the U.S. Congress introduced and voted for the Teamwork for Employees and Managers Act of '95, known as the TEAM Act. The bill would have weakened federal regulations against employer establishment and control of employee involvement programs. Although the bill indicated that EL plans should not be used specifically to discredit or prevent union organization, trade unions in the United States vehemently opposed the bill. Jim Wood, an AFL-CIO leader in Los Angeles, said the TEAM Act actually would take us backward to the days of company unions. President Bill Clinton thankfully vetoed that bill on July 30th of 1996. Calls to legalize company unions are rare, but New York University law professor Richard Epstein, in an opinion piece published in the Wall Street Journal on September 11th, 2018, called for the repeal of Section 8A2 of the NLRA. In short, companies have not stopped trying to infiltrate unions and weaken them. So it is for that reason that superintendents and managers are not allowed to be a part of local unions. Take that information with you and learn it, because we have protections in federal law and it's the federal government's position that it's a best practice to collectively bargain, and it's their position that they support collective bargaining agreements, and they support these type of arrangements because those honest negotiations where we can collectively bargain cause strikes to not happen as often and cause disruptions in consumer goods to be at a minimum. That's why they exist. That's why the U.S. government supports unions. That's also why we need to always be educated so that we can fully appreciate our rights, know our rights, and act accordingly. Because when you don't know your rights can be trampled on, and you wouldn't know any better. Again, this comes up because of the last union meeting and the conversation that was going on during discussion, and the fact that it was brought up and debated about a superintendent sending a letter of recommendation for someone that they wanted to become a union member. And one has to wonder, what was the intention behind that? Not that everything is nefarious, but you can see how there's a conflict of interest there. So keep diligent, stay involved, stay educated, and I hope you found this video informative. That's the National Labor Relations Act of 1935. It was written to protect union members, along with the LMRDA and the Taft-Hartley Act. So read up, educate yourself, educate your siblings, and spread the word. You heard? Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe button, notification bell, and drop some comments. Let me know what you think. Remember, the fight's not left and right. It's up and down. It's going to take solidarity to win always. So each one teach one. Get out there and reach one. Peace.